unwalkable tiles, because that also is a pretty game-breaking glitch and kind of changes it a bit. So this category omits all of those things. And it looks like we're just going to go ahead and get started here. The very beginning of the run is pretty basic. You don't really have any items with you, so starting out, you're just going to make your way to get the first one, which is the sword, after some dialogue. Actually, technically, you get the shield first, which does have it does have its uses in the speedrun. And movement tech in this game is really important. There's a lot of cool mechanics that are exploited throughout that kind of like for speed tech. The first trick coming up here, we call it quick sword, because if you look here, he's actually going to get the sword while the owl is on the screen. And the reason that's faster is because then you'd otherwise have to wait like a second and a half for the owl to leave the screen before it actually starts this dialog box. But this way it starts it immediately. There's a couple setups to do it, but Vlack did the faster one, which uses a damage boost off of that spike dude. And then from here, now we just have to get the Dungeon 1 key. This game, has 8 dungeons, kind of the classic Zelda formula. So to get into the first dungeon, we actually have to get its key, as well as some other auxiliary items that are useful in the speedrun. The funny thing about this movement to the beach is that it's been rerouted quite a few times since I've been running it, at least a couple years. Like, we used to take this top route, and then and it's funny because we just keep like finding new ways to do it, cutting off like, frames. This is the owl, which we've already seen once, but we're going to see him a handful of times after this. Just giving you some plot stuff, which isn't necessarily important to the speedrun. Tech smashing is not really that complicated. You really just want to hit A on the first frame you can. Here's another cool trick coming up. Destroy these crystals if you kind of stand close enough to that pit. And the trick coming up, he's actually taking kind of a backwards route to get this dungeon key, which is hidden at the end of this long puzzle. But you can do a damage boost off of a moblin to get over a pit. And this trick is really old. We've known about this for a long time, but it's kind of cool. It's a little randomness based because you need that moblin to face up, and you'll see why. He's going to shoot an arrow. Actually, this moblin is being particularly uncooperative. He's really not looking up, which is unfortunate. There we go. And then using a shield bounce, you can actually get him to do that. And that saves a lot of time, like many minutes worth of side questing. And we're going to do another owl skip. You see the owl fly in, and then nothing happens. And that's because using an exploit of the pause menu, you can actually like delay his animation enough to screen transition. It's really precise. The moblins in that forest were particularly trolly all around. They were just kind of moving in his way. He doesn't really have a way to dodge them quite yet, so that part can be a little stressful. And here's where we're going to collect a handful of items that are really important for the speedrun before we go into the first dungeon, the first being this magic powder. Using this particularly precise claw game. Let's see if we can get first try here. The joke being that game is really basic. We like to joke around when it's first try. Sweet damage boost off of the dog there. So here's the shop, and we're actually going to exploit a built-in mechanic of the shop where you can steal. That's actually not a glitch. And because it's not, they even include like dialogue when you do it, and then of course the shopkeeper kills you. That is the only intentional death we take in this game, because you have to in order to steal the bow, because you need to steal 2 items from him, but every time you steal he does that, so we can't really re-enter that shop anymore. But it's fine because we have basically everything we need, which is bombs, arrows, shovel, and the powder. You're going to see him do some... he's going to be seemingly arbitrarily kill enemies on his way throughout the game, and the reason he's doing that is because he's incrementing a kill count, which is to manipulate a really important item drop later on. And a funny quirk of that dungeon is that you actually don't... You can clip into that wall there to open the door. Wall clipping in this game is a pretty important mechanic for a lot of the glitch tech. So Vlack is actually doing a different route here for Dungeon 1 than is what is more commonly seen. And it's because it's a little more like high risk, high reward kind of thing. Usually we go to the left side, but this way he does the right side, which allows him to get a key a little earlier. The Dungeon 1 key is one of the more broken ones. It's the Rock's Feather, and it's going to let us jump. And you saw he just did his first menu in the run. Menuing in this game is really important. And the reason is because, unlike a lot of other Zelda games, your items don't have preset slots. So where you put them away in your menu, that's where they stay. So you really want to keep in mind where you're putting them every time and have it be consistent, or else you'll be losing a lot of time to the menu. And here's why this dungeon route is different. He's going to exploit a trick here. Or is hopefully going to be able to stand positioned on that platform and then do a little super jump there, is what we call that. So that was actually really good. He got that within 1 or 2 buffers, which means that this is actually going to save a lot of time over the traditional route. So that was actually really good. That trick it's like a frame rule. I don't want to call it RNG necessarily, but it's really dependent on like the frame you start doing it, because of the way pit physics works. And this is Moldorm. Moldorm is a bit of a troll. That was really nice. Vlack actually got a quick kill on him where he does a spin slash. That's only 3. Instead of 4 single hits. That saves a bit of time there too. So yeah, overall that was a really fantastic Dungeon 1. Yeah, like Vlack said in chat, it says like alternate D1 saves about 5 seconds. He got it on second buffer, so I think he still saved time. Maybe 2 or so seconds. So like I said, it's like high risk, high reward, because that buffer could actually take, 5 or 6 buffers to do. So, very cool. And before he goes to Dungeon 2, there's going to be a little bit more side questing. You'll notice there he actually went back to get that Octorok kill, and it's worth going back and making sure you have the right kill count, because the seconds it takes to go back and get the kill is less than the what you would lose if you didn't get the item drop later on in the game. You can see here, this is where we get most of the kills. The reason being is because actually the number we're looking for is 30 kills. So he's actually keeping all these in mind and counting as he goes. And this is the Moblin Cave. And the Moblin Cave is where we actually get a really important side character that we're rescuing. Important is maybe subjective. This fight is pretty straightforward. You can manipulate it to be the same every time. You just have to... We trick him into the top so that the amount of time it takes for him to actually run into the wall is shorter, because there's like less space there for him to run. And then it takes, I think 6 slashes total. And this is Bow Wow. And Bow Wow is a super necessary character for only a few reasons. To get into Dungeon 2, we need him because there's no other way to clip through these flowers here. If there was a way, I'm sure we'd probably end up routing him out of the game because he can be a bit of a pain. The reason being because every time he eats something, he actually increments your kill count. Also, shout out to Flock Clipping here, which is... forgot to mention. This rock can be bypassed if you trigger text while pushing into it like this, because for like 1 frame, you're still moving forward, and that's actually just enough to get you past that rock, and that saves about 30 seconds of movement. And there we have it. That's pretty much what we need Bow for. That was lucky too, because he can take forever to eat that flower. It's like really random. And that is the piece of power drop, which is what we're manipulating. So this item, I think it's 25% speed increase, and it makes your diagonal speed significantly faster too, which is really important. Yeah, pizza power. It also gives you a lot of knockback and doubles your attack damage output, which is really important for some quick kills on mini-bosses and just enemies in general. The one thing that's worth noting, though, is that if he takes 3 units of damage from enemies, specifically, then he'll actually lose that buffer, or that buff, so he needs to avoid enemies as much as he can. That being said, there are some intentional damages he'll take throughout the route, but they're very calculated. For the most part, you don't want any random mishaps. This room, it has a funny solution that's not intended. If these ghosts fly off screen, then it just believes that they're dead. And it'll give you the dungeon item, which is the power brace. Oh yeah, and like Mashi said in the chat, the reason he's opening that save quit menu when he's opening chests is because that actually overwrites the dialogue you'd otherwise get from chests, which takes just slightly longer than opening the menu. Overall, this dungeon went really well. All the enemy movement was really accommodating. No real trickery or anything. Here's a funny little trick you can do, jumping around there. And the Dungeon 2 boss is got a really cool quick kill. Usually you're supposed to go through the 3 cycles where you pick him up in his bottle and then break it and then you slash him, but exploiting wall clipping, you can actually throw the bottle while inside the wall. And what that does is it deals damage every frame for some reason, which deals enough to skip all the other cycles. And it's really quick, so you gotta check this out. He deals the last few bits of damage using 2 bombs for the second phase of the fight, which also makes that go pretty quick. Yeah, that quick kill is very cool. And that's the second of eight instruments that he has to collect. And you actually don't have to wait for Bow Wow to eat these flowers to leave, you can just clip past them. And from here on out, he's gonna be keeping track of what Bow Wow eats, because, like we said, that increments his kill count, and we're still manipulating the kill routes. We're gonna be manipulating the kill route until Dungeon 5. Possibly 6, depending on what Vlack is comfortable doing. I believe that bomb arrows in this game were actually an intended mechanic, so you'll see him doing that a lot just to make bombs explode faster. Oh, and coming up here is a huge sequence break, which also exploits that pit trick that he did in D1, and this is called Villa Skip. Essentially, he's going to try to do that same trick where he can stay put on the bottom part of the screen here by buffering until he hears Link fall, and then when he does a screen transition down, it's actually going to put him in this garden that otherwise you would need to get unlocked by collecting all these feathers in this castle. And again, it's a frame rule, so the number of times he has to buffer, you don't really know until you actually do it. It averages around 4 or 5, sometimes it's upwards of like double digits, so that was not bad. I think that was about an average Villa Skip, so that was good. Using a similar trick where if you transition down there over the same tile as the bush, it'll just shove you all the way to the bottom and put you out of the garden. So that's kind of one of the more fluctuant parts of the run in terms of time loss or save. Exploiting wall clipping again, we actually don't need to go to the bottom part to unlock this. We can just clip into the side. And then this is Dungeon 3. So this dungeon actually had a pretty different route about a year ago until this really cool trick was discovered that lets you skip the mini-boss fight. And this is also where we'll be seeing the second piece of power drop, which from what I can tell, he's on point for that. Bow Wow didn't eat too much extra stuff, so he's going for his planned extra kills here. He has to be careful not to pick up that acorn, because the acorn will actually overwrite piece of power drops, because it considers it a buff, and it won't give you another buff if you have it active. So cool, that's pretty much exactly where you want to get it. And now he's going to do a super jump out of the mini-boss room here, which is a pretty new trick. It's very cool. It's a little precise. And he got it, nice. He's going to do that twice. But we used to actually have to kill one of the Dodongos there by throwing bombs in its mouth, and then to let us pass through that room. But doing this, we actually save about 20 seconds because it makes that fight trivial. It's possible to soft lock on that super jump, but with enough practice you can get the setup pretty consistent. Because you can actually get stuck in the wall there, and when you're stuck in walls, sometimes you don't have the ability to escape it without saving quitting. So both times he got it. This is a really optimal D3. So far, all of his dungeons have been really good. And another flock clip here lets us skip one of the key blocks. So we actually only collect 2 of the 4 keys for that. And super jumping kind of looks random, but basically what he's doing is he's clipping into the wall, and then when he faces away from the wall and gives an input like away from it, the game confuses where he is and treats it like Link is on a ledge, and it'll do the jumping down animation, which actually lets you skip over things because it considers you on like a level above them momentarily. And the Vitreous quick kill there is made a lot faster with Piece of Power and using the boot dashes, which I forgot to mention. The Pegasus boots are the Dungeon 3 item, and these are, for the speedrun at least, really important because they help optimizing overworld movement. Yeah, every boss in this game more or less has a quick kill. It's pretty crazy. Because a lot of them are fairly formulaic in their movement, so you can kind of plan out what they're going to do. This is our owl friend again. And coming up, the next big trick we're going to do actually is, it's a new piece of tech we haven't seen yet. And this trick is called a bomb trigger. And it's going to look really weird, but what he's going to do is he's going to lay a bomb on the same frame, or within a few frames of doing a screen transition down into another screen. And for some reason what that does is when it loads up all the sprites of that other screen, when it's considering that there's a bomb being placed, the game freaks out and doesn't know where to put that in terms of like the sprite count. And for some reason, the way it remedies that is it just overwrites the it overwrites some value in the game that causes story-based triggers on that screen to happen. So depending on where you bomb trigger, some screens it'll cause things to happen like this walrus to be woken up, where otherwise you would need this other character to sing to him. But when it starts that event early, you don't actually need to go get that character at all. You can just have it be done instantly. A funny characteristic of this trick, though, is that it still considers Link in like cutscene mode, so he actually can't use any of its inputs. So what he has to do here is leave and re-enter this cave, which otherwise we wouldn't need to do. We only do that simply to allow him to equip arrows, or use any items, period. I guess in this case he already had arrows, but... And it's worth mentioning, because of bomb triggers, that actually allows us to skip needing to get this other item. It's an ocarina. which we need to play a bunch of songs, but all those songs are tied to events anyways, so we can actually bomb trigger all the events that would otherwise be caused by the ocarina. And that cuts out a lot of side questing. So we're on our way to Dungeon 4 to get the Dungeon 4 item. But the thing about Dungeon 4 is that there's actually a side quest tied to completing that dungeon, where if you play this game casually, you'd remember you have to collect this ghost, or you have to help this ghost get to the his like resting place. And when you have that ghost active on screen, you actually can't go into other dungeons, so you can't just like ignore him and then just like keep going and getting instruments, because he'll stop you and say like, no, take me home. So we can avoid that by only doing half of this dungeon right now. And we still need to complete it, but as long as we complete it after Dungeon 6, it's, for some reason, that causes that event to not ever happen, and we can skip doing the ghost side quest. And regarding bomb triggers, because someone asked in chat if you can bomb trigger the egg cutscene. At the end, when you go to this egg and you play this song to wake up the windfish, you can trigger that cutscene to happen without all the instruments, but it does the same thing as if you were to just play the song without all of them, and it says you still need to collect them. So unfortunately, we can't use bomb triggers to actually get to the end of the game early, otherwise it would make this category a lot shorter. There's a pretty swag trick in this cave coming up that we'll have the opportunity to do twice. This is the first of two. And the trick is called obstacle skip. So it's like what you just saw Black do there. He just jumps over that rock. And that lets you actually just not boost through the rock, but just jump over it, which saves maybe like half a second. It's pretty cool. So this is Dungeon 4. Got a detour to get some bombs there. Bomb count in this game is really important because bomb triggering is a thing. That means you need a certain number of bombs to be able to perform these. I think it uses 2 per trigger. So if you were to run out in a place where you need to do several of them, you'll actually end up being kind of up a creek because you can't progress the game. Getting that key there without breaking that block is an example of how you can use Pegasus boots to kind of make things go faster. Because you can exploit the fact that you can get a long jump, similar to that skipping over that pit there, which casually you're never intended to be able to jump at and turn at a right angle like that, or they didn't think you could, or that you would. So it cuts out about half the dungeon by doing that. And that's Cue Ball, the mini boss of Dungeon 4. You'll see here, he's actually doing a spin slash to kill these Zoles, because that actually only does 1 kill per, instead of single slashing, which then creates 2 enemies. Because he doesn't want to increment his kill count too high. Not just yet. He's pretty close to getting the next piece of power drop, so at this point he's going to try to avoid any kills if he can, and do the rest of them in Dungeon 5. And the reason he only wants the piece of power to drop in dungeons is because when you enter or leave a building or like a cave or a dungeon, it removes the buff, so it's only active when you're in one like location. And the reason we needed the Dungeon 4 item is so that we can enter D5, which is surrounded by water. But you don't really have any penalty for like not completing the dungeon in that moment. The only reason you'd get the instrument is to get to the last egg part. So if we just route it in later, we're still fine. So Dungeon 5 is probably where Piece of Power makes the biggest impact. Because it's a very long dungeon, there's a lot of walking specifically. And I think the difference between having it and not having it is maybe like 30 seconds. It's really big. It's a huge impact if you don't get it. Hopefully he'll get the drop soon. Seems as though the kill count was a little low, which is understandable because sometimes when you're not sure what it's at, you're better undershooting than overshooting, because then you'll actually at least still get it in the dungeon, which he did. So that was good. That's like the third room you could get it, so that's good. These Helmasars can be a little tricky for people who have played this or other Zeldas. Helmasars actually have a directional hitbox, or they have a directional weak point where you actually have to slash behind the mask that they wear. This is the Master Stalfos, and this is sort of the mini boss of this dungeon. Not really. There's also a Goma that you have to fight casually that we don't see here. But he has the dungeon item, so we need to follow him around the dungeon, killing him in 4 different places until he finally gives it to us. And that's the majority of kind of the progression in the dungeon, is just following him around. And similarly, we have a quick kill for him because he always falls in the middle, so as long as you time your bomb drops and your slashes the same, you can always kill him in the same fashion. And the items that he uses to kill being either a bomb or a bomb arrow. To kill them is actually intentional. The reason he didn't use a bomb arrow there to finish off the first Master Stalfos is both to preserve arrow count, and also because it doesn't lose or waste any time, because you still have to wait for his getting up animation, which is on a global timer. So using a bomb arrow doesn't really make a difference, from what I understand. Here's a cool little damage boost. That's one of the routed in damages. So in Dungeon 5, it's pretty risky because there's actually 2 intentional damage boosts we do, which is as many hits as you can take without losing piece of power. So if you want to be optimal, you'll go for that, but that means you actually have to avoid taking any additional damage, which on high-level play, like Vlack does, usually that's not an issue. You can make it through pretty good. Using wall clipping there, you actually cannot have those Exos damage you because their hitbox isn't touching you. And here's, we have to kill the Helmasar in this room again, which is, again, RNG. So hopefully he's facing the same direction as Vlack, which he wasn't, but he turned up, which was the second best thing that could have happened, so. And then notice we're backtracking this way again, and that's because the final Master Stalfos room is right where we were before. Hence all the walking. You can see that there's just a lot of backtracking in this dungeon. And this is a case where you will see him finish him off with a bomb arrow, and that's because this death animation doesn't start until it dies, so you just have to spam as fast as you can, and it's worth using an arrow there. And with that, that is the hookshot, which is the dungeon I'm here, which is actually a really important item for the speedrun. There's actually a trick that we'll use later on to get another dungeon key, exploiting the hookshot, as well as some other cool tricks. But for now, we're just going to make our way to the Dungeon 5 boss, which is a little random, but in recent past, I think it was last year, we found a really cool way to manipulate him. Or to not manipulate him, but to minimize the likelihood of getting extra cycles. You'll notice he got an extra hit there to actually remove his piece of power buff, and the reason he did that is because this fight is made a lot harder when you have the knockback of the piece of power, because it extends his iframes, and a lot of this fight is just timing your slashes. So when he has extra iframes, the window to deal damage to him is smaller. So he can pop out of any of these 4 holes that he's created, the snake. But depending on where you stand, you can just kind of make sure you can always reach him. It takes 8 slashes, so that's 4, and it looks like... Nice. Okay, so that's pretty much exactly how you want it to happen. 2 cycles. I think that was just... I think that was like a 29.59, so like a sub 30 D5 time is really good. So this is on a really good pace. Especially for a marathon. And if you spam the jump button while in water, it actually accelerates your swimming speed, so he exploits that a lot when he's underwater. So to get the Dungeon 6 key, we're gonna go through an area called the Armos Maze. And the Armos Maze is tricky, because Armoses deal 2 full hearts of damage, which is insanely overpowered when relative to other things, which at most maybe do 1 heart. So it makes... You want to minimize the amount of damage you can take here. Sometimes it's not up to you, you can just take a lot of damage because of RNG things like bomb drops from those fairies. We can avoid having to deal with most of the Armoses by just shield bumping them, and when you have the Pegasus boots, it actually creates a ton of knockback, which also doesn't activate them, because the only way they wake up is if Link's actual hitbox touches them. So for the most part, you can kind of keep your distance or prevent activating them. In some cases, he'll do it intentionally, but... And the Master, or the big Armos, this one has a quick kill. It's based on timing, because we need to slash him as soon as he spawns. And a lot of different runners have different strats for that quick kill. That was really good. I think maybe he got a little unlucky with getting stun locked by one of the bonks there, but for the most part, that's how you want that to go. And Armos is also, they're a guaranteed arrow drop, so if Bow Wow eats them, you can take advantage of that by collecting arrows. As you see, I think he's gotten 2 so far, which is really good. You only really need 2 extra ones here, which, that's all you need to really, make use of them. But it never hurts to have more. There's a room above the Armos fight that you can go to, but it's completely optional because all it does is show you, this, big dialogue cutscene that explains, the backstory to the island. So it's in the context of a speedrun, it's not important. Do we just kind of leave? This pit has a kind of precise diagonal jump, which you got first try. Oh yeah, and here's something. So this is funny. You'll see when you open that keyhole, you're supposed to see a cutscene of this dungeon opening like that. But what happened was Bow Wow actually ate the cutscene because when it spawns, the game considers it in the same light as a sprite. So when it's on the map, it actually has a hitbox apparently, which Bow Wow detects and can eat. And I think that was something that was never really looked at too closely because in a casual playthrough, you're supposed to return Bow Wow, maybe 10% of the way into the game. So there's no reason he would be there in the first place. But yeah, because we have Bow Wow, we can actually manipulate him to eat the cutscenes, which ends them immediately. So it's kind of it's funny because you wonder if it's really worth routing him out, because although he can eat too many things and give you early piece of power drops, he can also save you tons of time by eating cutscenes. So it's kind of a give or take. He carries his weight for all the trouble he gives you. And here's an exploit of the hook shots. I think Vlack does it. Yeah. So he hookshotted into that pot twice, which the second time around, it actually shifts his pixel to be considered inside the pot. And for some reason, that gives him this weird lengthened invincibility phase so that the tiles weren't doing any damage to him. and doing a really calculated bomb drop here, you can kill all of these Wizrobes in one go. We used to have like a 2 bomb arrow strat there, which just costs more resources and was a little slower, so that's a really cool strat. Here's a trick that Vlack came up with. Vlack is actually responsible for a lot of rerouting in this dungeon specifically, which ended up cutting maybe about 10 seconds off of the an ideal Dungeon 6 time. Oh, trolled by the acorn there. He got it on the last frame, which just ended up wasting time because he had the menu. That was really unfortunate. Oh, he's going for the cool clip here. That super jump clip is really insanely precise, but he got it first try. That was really good. So yeah, Vlack came up with this route that we're doing here, I believe, where he did a super jump over that wall, and he's actually going through this dungeon now backwards. He's doing this the unintended route, but the reason we do this is because it lets you get to the boss door a little faster, assuming that some RNG goes in your favor, which is these horse heads. It's 50-50 if you get either, from what I understand, so the fact that he got it second try was actually really good, and that means that he benefited from this route. Yes, that was a really good example of like a really optimized D6 and a really new kind of, like, you know, in the history of LADX, that route is still pretty new, so that's cool. Yeah, we actually used to have horse heads before the older route, which was the new route at the time, which removed them, and people were happy about that because horse heads are RNG, and sometimes they can take like 20 tries, which wastes you about, 15 seconds or so, and you can't really do anything about it. So this is another strat where it's high risk, high reward, because if you get good horse heads, then you do save time. That was the Dungeon 6 boss. Really impressive. Very difficult boss. I say that sarcastically because his hitbox is there before the dialogue even happens, so you can get 3 of the 5 necessary hits on him before he even talks, so it's kind of free. And I think they kind of got an idea that that boss wasn't very impressive because, yeah, he was downgraded to a mini boss in the other 2 GBC game, Zelda games, as Mashy said in the chat. Poor face boss. Here's another tiny bomb trigger. So I say tiny because all it does is really skip the owl animation, which does save about 4 seconds, but that's about it. If you miss it, it's not a big deal. It doesn't like ruin your routing or anything. And then this, so what you're seeing him here is he's going through this cave, which we call like the raft cave, because you're supposed to use it to get to this house where you can do a raft ride and stuff. But what he's going to do now is go to Dungeon 4 to complete that one, because now there's no more side quest tied to that. And this route is actually also pretty new. I guess at this point it's not really. This is pretty conventional at this point. We used to actually go straight to Dungeon 8 after Dungeon 6, but now we go 4, 7, 8. And that's just due to we re-examined some overworld movement and actually came up with a route that saves 35 seconds on doing it in a slightly older way, and that was a pretty big deal at the time. Exploiting the fact that you can clink off Peapots, he can get straight to that boss key by just jumping over the wall there, which saves, I think, 2 screens of movement, because otherwise you'd have to go under into like the basement level of this dungeon. And this is the angler fight. It's very straightforward. If you stay above him like that, you're not really vulnerable to anything except for his own hitbox. And he has low enough health that after just a couple spin slashes and just spamming slash on him or using bomb arrows or what have you, you can just kill him before he really poses any threat to you. Yeah, when super jumping came around, this dungeon changed a lot because of that Peapot clink. Before that, we actually had to solve this like kind of slightly random puzzle, so you had to keep these little patterns up on your computer screen, so that super jumps really make that a lot less of a burden. And now that we have that dungeon, we don't need to worry about Dungeon 4 anymore. Now we just need to worry about finishing up the last 2 dungeons, which to get to Dungeon 7 next, we need to get its dungeon key first. And this is one of the more infamous parts of the run, because the Dungeon 7 key is hidden behind this big pit that goes around this bend. And usually what the developers want you to do is they want you to revive this rooster that's been sleeping in this tomb in the first village. And you want to use that to pick him up and fly over the pit. But we actually don't need that. We can exploit a trick with the hookshot where you're given 1 frame to do an input when the hookshot returns to Link. Also, shoutouts to two obstacle skips. That's a good song. So, like, basically what happens is you can use 2 of these hookshot jumps to get around the bend without needing the bird. But they're both, like, basically frame perfect, so this is a really tricky thing to do. And if you don't get it first try, you're brought back down to the base of the mountain and you have to climb back up, so it loses you a lot of time. Just kind of devastating for, like, PB attempts. And the reason this trick is scary is because Bow Wow can actually... like you saw there, Bow Wow can actually get in the way of the hookshot, which causes it to clink, and that just ruins your timing. So he actually had to kind of wait for a bit before he could try the trick again, because Bow Wow was in the way, and it's a lot riskier to try doing it in that case. So sometimes you can't be helped. He'll just get in the way, and he'll make it close to impossible. Even top level runners, it can really give you a lot of trouble. And this is the big reason why we just really would like to rat out Bow Wow, because this trick is made a lot harder because of him, for the reasons you've seen. Nice. Okay, so that was still really good. And that's why you can also see it's a pretty infamous part of the run. It's kind of a gatekeeper for runners who are still learning, because that trick it is frame perfect. It requires a lot of timing, and you kind of have to do it all on the fly because you're like in the middle of a pit. But yeah, once you get a feel for it, it's a lot less difficult. And this part is pretty straightforward. Just a lot of like overworld movement. Not really much going on there. And we're just gonna make our way to Dungeon 7. And Dungeon 7 also has a cutscene eat opportunity, assuming that Bow Wow is cooperating and he'll actually eat it. Judging by the rest of this run, I'm hoping he will. Yeah, he's been eating a lot of stuff, so this could be good. I think this one has actually been known. This one has been known since before we were able to route in Bow Wow here. When the trick was found, I don't think we actually used Bow Wow here. So we were like, oh, it's cool, but we can't do it. And now we actually can. So it kind of, that trick was given new life. Dungeon 7 heavily exploits the bomb trigger glitch, because casually you're supposed to take the sphere and throw it at these big pillars and knock down like a level of the tower to let you get to the top level where the boss is. But using bomb triggers, you can actually make these pillar drop events happen without needing to actually physically use the ball. You do need to do them in a specific order though, because for some reason in the game's code it makes sense. They're organized in a certain fashion so that some have priority over others. So you actually can't trigger some events without having others happen. Using bomb triggers, at least. I think if you had the Dungeon 7 ball, you could do them in any order. but because we're kind of cutting some corners on the code here, we have to play along to some of the quirks of its coding. Doing those unbuffered, you saw he wasn't even using a screen transition in this case. Also, here's a cool thing. We call this Goomba surfing. I'll let him do this first. It's a little random, so hopefully he'll get it first try. What he's waiting to do is he's waiting for the Goomba to move in a certain direction so that he can actually exploit the bonk that it gives him to get some extra height to get over that ledge. And if you get that within 1 or 2 tries, it actually saves a little bit of Dungeon 7 movement. But yeah, as I was saying, dropping the bombs into a pit as opposed to a screen transition means that the timing's a lot more precise. I think you have to drop each bomb within, I think, 4 frames of each other, so your tapping has to be really on point, which he got both first try, which was really good. And I think fighting that bird casually, you're supposed to use the shield and I think the hook shot maybe to deal damage to it, but the game also makes them vulnerable to bombs, so by just timing bomb drops like that, it goes a lot quicker. We used to have the fire rod for that fight when we did Dungeon 8 first, which actually was really nice because the fire rod does a lot more damage to it, so what you would do is you would just stun lock it during its first flyby and just spam the bomb kind of rhythmically, which made the fight go a lot faster, admittedly, but just overall it wasn't worth it due to the faster routing. You're just better off doing it this way. And there's a funny quirk of this route, actually, is that now there's a story-based cutscene that we used to kind of skip without realizing it when we did Dungeon 8 first, but you'll see here this girl named Marin is trapped on this bridge, and she's like being held hostage by these these moblin pirate-like dudes. But you don't actually have to save her. You only start the rest of that cutscene when you touch her sprite. So if you just kind of like sneak past underneath, you can just be like, "Sorry, Marin, I got things to do." So you can just skip it. If you actually touch Marin, it's about 40 seconds of cutscene. But yeah, so Bible thump. Rip Marin. Exploiting the fact that the bomb hitbox extends there, we can open that early. And here, this is that fire fountain. You're supposed to use the Dungeon 7 item to get past that, which is like an enhanced shield, which kind of pushes the fire to the side. But if you just clip into the wall, you can stop your knockback and just keep walking. Which makes that trick look kind of funny. It's actually really easy. And that was another bomb trigger to start this cutscene, which opens up Turtle Rock. Otherwise, you need the ocarina, which, of course, we skip, because you can just glitch your way through all these cutscenes. So, Dungeon 8. There's a couple ways to do Dungeon 8. Yeah, I think each one only varies by 1 or 2 seconds, so it's a little subjective which one you do, just kind of preference. Luckily, there's some refills that you can do here. Which, usually when you're low on arrows at this part, you can minimize... You can, like, usually, you don't run the risk of running too low on arrows, because you can always opt to get that refill, which doesn't cost too much time. This part can be a little tricky, because the fireballs here actually spawn randomly, so sometimes they can just get in your way right at the wrong time. And the Dungeon A mini-boss, which is Blino, which if you play the Oracle games, you'd recognize him as like a side quest where you actually have to like fight him to get an item. But in this case, he's just kind of reduced to a mini-boss. There's actually a way to skip him using a super jump over that block on that screen, which we used to do until we redefined some of our out-of-bounds definitions, and that one didn't fall within the acceptable range, so we actually had to ban it. You can exploit the fact that you can move when those push blocks are, when that like push block thing is moving, to actually get to where you're trying to go before it even stops, because otherwise your movement has been interrupted. And that's the second time we get to see Cue Ball, our favorite mini-boss. So this room is really cool. You're supposed to solve this thing, but if you know what you're doing, you can actually put Link, like I mentioned before, because you can move. You can put Link where he's supposed to be before it even finishes, which saves some movement time. It's about 2 or 3 seconds, because the chest spawns like right there. And it looks really cool when you do it right, like Black did. Because it just spawns and you just immediately open the chest. Coming up is the Dungeon 8 boss. Here's a trick. So he's trying to land on the lava and pause on the same frame he touches it, because it actually shifts you a pixel down, and you can just super jump your way over there, which saves a lot of like basement movement. This boss is random. In the sense that in the way he spawns, and some spawn points are easier to stun lock him in and some are harder. And he also has like a long phase where he has iframes after you hit him with fire, so actually spamming the fire rod isn't really optimal. You kind of want to time it and get a feel for it. That was a 2-cycle, which is really good. It was a quick 2-cycle too, because the second one was pretty short. It's kind of ironic, yeah, you use the fire rod to kill the enemy that lives in, like, literally lives in lava. It's like a little bit of an oversight when you picked your home there, dude. So we actually have all the instruments now, which means all we have to do is go to the top of this mountain and enter the final, dungeon, so to speak. I think a big part of the reroute for Dungeon Order was that the movement to the final boss from D8 is a lot faster than moving to it from D4 when we used to do that last. So that's kind of where a lot of the time save was, I think. We're going to do one more cutscene trigger here, and the reason, well, actually, the second to last cutscene trigger, and the reason is because you're supposed to use the ocarina to start the Song of the Windfish here, but if you just bomb trigger it, you can just start the cutscene. And this is what we were mentioning when we said you can actually bomb trigger this cutscene anytime you want, but if you don't have all 8 instruments, the game still checks for that, and it'll still prevent you from entering if you don't have them. This is about a minute's worth of just, cutscene time that you have to wait. It's actually kind of nice, too. If you're really nervous going into the end game and you're on PB pace, you can kind of sit here and take a breather for a sec. And inside of this dungeon, there really isn't much to it except for a single puzzle, which is this kind of classic puzzle you see in a lot of Zelda games where there's four directions you can move in this room. There's a preset pattern you have to do or else you'll get stuck back at the beginning. And you're supposed to do a trade quest to get this magnifying glass that lets you read a book in the library that lets you know the correct pattern to use. But if you never read that book, it does a preset pattern that it defaults to every time consistently. And if you just know that pattern, you can just do it normally. It doesn't actually bar you from solving it at all. And he's spamming bombs during this transition, because you can actually do one last cutscene trigger there, which prevents the boss dialogue from opening up. But what that does is actually creates like a glitch state of the boss fight where you hear the music is really junked up and like he's like in the wall here, which doesn't make any sense, but you just kind of have to accept it. This boss is a bunch of phases that you'll recognize from other games. This is Aghanim, which we all know from like Link to the Past and stuff, and he actually works kind of in the same way, where these orbs that he's shooting at you can either deal damage to him, or they can just shoot this like random stuff that doesn't hurt him and waste time, and it's a 50-50. So like that. Yeah. So that's one. He still needs to do 2 damage to him because he has 4 health. That's 2 of the blue balls, which is about average RNG. Ideally, you get none, you know, but each one costs about 8 seconds, I think, because you have to wait for him to move and respawn and stuff. That's, I think, 4 already? Wow, this Aghanim is not cooperating. Okay, so now he just needs... He has 1 damage he has to do. Nice, okay, and you got the next 2 in a row. So he's going to try to stun lock this state, which is like a mold orb. If you do a spin slash right there and time it right, you can actually keep the guy from moving, and that makes his hitbox vulnerable to spin slashes, or to normal slashes. And then, of course, Ganon, which is this state. You can just boot dash into him 12 times, and that deals enough damage to hurt him, so GG. And now the final phase is what we call Deathel. He's like this weird one-eyed monster, and he has 16 health, so we're going to try to shoot arrows into his eyes when he opens them. The timing for these is pretty tricky. You can get 4 arrow hits in 1 eye open if you time it really well. So ideally, it only takes 4 cycles. This is also random. Sometimes you can just not open his eye, like, ever. And it can waste, like, basically all your time save if you're, like, ahead. This is going pretty well, actually. He's opening it pretty quick. Assuming the last 2. I think he needs it to open 2 more times. And this should be it. Nice. Okay, cool. So time comes up when the screen fades to white. I guess Vlack's the one doing the timer, so he already knows that. And if you do like a moonwalk from the corner here, you actually hit this ladder on the first frame it happens. So it kind of looks funny. And that's a 57-21. Nice. That was a really good run. So, congrats, Vlack. That was sick. Yeah, really good run. And then we get to watch this nice cutscene where the windfish shows up and does his noise. I want that sound as like a ringtone or something. So, I suppose someone will just pop in here and send us off. I think that was the last run of the marathon, right? Something like that. So.
You were indeed the final run of the marathon.
Nice.
You and Black.
How's it going, EDC?
It's going. I am ready to go to sleep.
Yeah, I bet you've probably been working at this for a while.
I've been up since like 5:30, 6 o'clock this morning.
Holy guacamole.
Coasted all day.
Yeah, and then the island gets destroyed. RIP. The windfish woke up. Dream whale, whatever you call it.
I've always called it a whale. Acid whale.
Acid whale, yeah. Or the carpet whale. I always wondered about the ending here. I was like, it's kind of like heroic looking, but it's like Link's stranded in the middle of the ocean. like, what's he gonna do? Yeah, there is going to be an LADX tournament using this category that you just saw. I think in September. So if you're interested in that at all, contact literally any of the runners for this game. They'll give you the links and or the Discord to the LADX speedrunning.
I just love Link's face after he sees the silhouette of the whale in the sky. He's so happy that he's stranded in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, he's just like, wow. There's like a fan theory that this actually leads into Oracle of Ages because you get struck by lightning on a raft in the middle of that game, and then you wash up on a beach. So some people say it's like that happens, and you have a dream, and then you wake up on Tokay Island.
Huh.
I think that's a pretty cool theory.
That's a pretty interesting theory. Alright guys, well thank you all for coming and watching Handheld Heroes. This is the first one we've ever done, and I would say the runs were phenomenal. Setup was great, so thank you to all the runners that we had this weekend. Thank you to everyone that helped set up. Huge thank you to Feasel, allowing us to use Speed Gaming Channel to stream on this and to help set up and correct audio issues and whatever else that needed to be fixed. Shout outs to /Finity and Atros for organizing this marathon as well. Man Over Mars for the layout. I think that's all the shout outs I got. My Twitch is broken, or else I would spam Twitter links and stuff, but yeah, I think we're going to cut it here and call it here. Feasel's going to go find a stream to raid. So again, thank you all for coming out and making this weekend fantastic.